Alright, what's up you guys? This is Devin from CenturyFX Studios, back with another video. And today we're going to be talking about the top 5 cameras from Canon that you do not want in 2019. Now first, I'm going to start off this video because I know people are going to get mad at me. I'm going to tell you guys that I am a Canon shooter. I've been maining on Canon for like 10-11 years now, so I know the trends of Canon. I've shot with the full frame cameras, the smaller cameras. I've shot with a lot of them, and a lot of them don't really change, and we're going to get into that in this list today. But for number 5, we have a 4-way tie with the T2i, the T3i, the T4i, and the T5i. These cameras are essentially all the exact same camera. And you might be saying, what do you mean, Devin? The T4i came out with the autofocus video? Yes, but the reason why I say all these cameras are almost exactly the same is because they all have the same 18 megapixel sensor. They all come out back to back to back pretty much yearly. This is one of the only Canon cycles, along with some of the other smaller beginner brand cameras or beginner modeled cameras. They all come out yearly. They come out annually. You can look forward to them coming out in some shape, form, or fashion, along with some other smaller brand beginner camera from Canon. They keep making cameras and cameras and cameras and cameras, but with these specific cameras on the Rebel series, it's like they didn't even want to bother to change. They didn't even want to bother to change the video. It's still 1080p. All these cameras shoot 1080p. I think even the T6S and the T6i all shoot 1080p, and I think even the T7i shoots 1080p. But they never bothered to upgrade these cameras. I think even in 2011, 2012, we were using 4K. People were using 4K, if not in the GoPro, in some other shape, form, or fashion. But 4K was a thing back then, and Canon was not upgrading. And to this day, they still are struggling to bring out 4K cameras to the smaller compact camera world. The DSLR world, the mirrorless world, it's hard to get 4K fully operational 4K. I know the EOS R has 4K. I know the M50 has 4K, and I think the EOS RP might have 4K. But all of these are stifled in some type of a way where it's not like a Sony camera where you get pretty much all the luxuries of their video capabilities, except maybe a little crop. So with these 4 cameras that came out at number 5 here that are all tied, they all are exactly the same cameras in that regard. All 1080p, all 18 megapixel sensors, almost the exact same focus system, and all of them, there's no operational difference. Pretty much 4 frames a second, 5 frames a second. Maybe the T5i has 6 frames a second, maybe, but I don't even think it's just not worth it, guys. Don't get these cameras. Now, if you have them, it's fine. Do the best you can with what you have. In that case, the best camera you have is the one you have with you. But in the grand scheme of 2019, mirrorless cameras, full frame cameras under $1,000, if you have the ability to upgrade and you're an enthusiast and you're not comfortable with this camera, go ahead and upgrade it, and upgrade it to something good. I'm going to have a video about what cameras that you should have from Canon because they make so many of them. But these 4, they are just the exact same camera, and everybody was frustrated when they came out. Number 4. All right, so you know the TI series, the Rebel TI series. Now we have the T series. It only has a T on it. I know Canon names, they get very confusing because they make so many daggone lines of cameras. But the T series, that's the one without the I. You have the T3, the T5, and the T6. They're all tied for number 4 because they are the exact same camera. Once again, all these cameras are almost exactly the same with that same 18 megapixel sensor. As a matter of fact, there are like 16 or 17 cameras that Canon made over the span of almost 10 years that all had this same 18 megapixel sensor. And you might be saying to yourself, well, they're probably making upgrades to it, right? Well, camera manufacturers actually can't make that much of an upgrade with an annual camera. It just can't be upgraded because technology doesn't move as fast as they're spinning out the cameras. You can't make an 18 megapixel sensor that much different, especially not Canon, because Canon's not known to be giving you a whole bunch of new features in your camera anyway. But even Sony, an innovative brand, they can't spit out too many different or updated specs without having backlash. Like, for example, they had overheating sensors, they had buffering issues and all these other things that was happening because they kept spitting out cameras with new and the most advanced specs at the time for the price. So You think Canon's gonna do that? The mecca of camera sales, the most popular camera company pretty much in the world right now that's doing the best out of all the camera companies. No, they're looking for their buck, guys. They want their money. So with them spinning out all these cameras in the early 2010s and 2010s, you got to think that there was a lot of used cameras that had the same sensors on the market, and you guys are buying them. Yes, it's smart to buy a camera that's cheaper, but at the same time, you're not getting an upgrade just going to these cameras. And a lot of people upgrade from their cell phones to these T2Is and those T3 and those T5 and T6 Rebels, and they're not really upgrades in the grand scheme of DSLRs. So you want to start to upgrade to something like a 70D or 80D, because these were tight cameras, tight dual pixel autofocus in video, where autofocus in video for DSLRs wasn't a thing when they first started to come out in the 2010s and 2009s and 2008s. So you want to have a camera that will give you not only autofocus, but good autofocus in video and good picture quality, and not just the same 18 megapixel sensor in the 1080p that these three cameras are tied in fourth place for. And they also are smaller cameras. They don't have as good as build quality as the TI Rebels. So that's why they made it to number 4 and not number 5 on the list. Now we're going to go to number 3 on the list. Number 3 is another 18 megapixel small bodied censored camera from Canon, which is the Canon SL1. Now this camera came out and it was marketed as the smallest DSLR. Oh, you can do all this stuff. And in the grand scheme of things, it was needed. In the grand scheme of things, it was needed. But it wasn't what I thought Canon should have went with this camera. Now the SL1 was primed to and advertised just like the Jeep Renegade. Like, they're gonna send you all these advertisements for something that really sucks. The SL1, it gave you all these creative modes, this creative auto, all these creative filters, because that's what Instagram was throwing everything. Instagram was saying, oh, you needed filters, so all this stuff in camera so you can spit it out right to the post, and then you needed the smallest thing so everybody can carry it around and be convenient instead of being a photographer. In my opinion, it's not necessarily about how you look. Now, of course, the comfort matters, but lenses don't actually change their size. So when you go to put a big lens on this SL1, you're going to have this small body on this big lens, and then the weight's going to be off, all this other stuff. I think if you're trying to be a photographer or somebody who wants to take really, really good pictures, size shouldn't necessarily matter all that much. And look doesn't really matter all that much. The cameras are really, really small for what they do anyway. And you need something that's sturdy that you can actually have in your hands and be counteracting that lens weight. They should be encouraging you to get more lenses, because physics says that you can't really change and manipulate the size of the lens and maintain a certain amount of quality. It's only marketing that tells you that these smaller lenses can do what these bigger lenses can do. Why is there a 400 millimeter 2.8 or a 400 millimeter lens, or a 100 to 400 or 70 to 200 that looks as big as this one right here? I mean, why would, if camera manufacturers can make it smaller, why won't they just make it smaller? They can't. So they will make the smaller ones and market it to the people who don't know better, and have the big stuff to the people who do know better. That's why bigger camera is not always bad, because you can hold it in your hands and stuff like that. Now, if the SL1 is comfortable for you, that's one thing. You don't even have to use that as an excuse to put this at number 3. You can use the fact that it has an 18 megapixel sensor after what, 8, maybe 7 years of already making so many different 18 megapixel sensor cameras. And you might be saying, well, Devin, it's not all about the megapixels. What about the dynamic range? Because like I said, they can't make a camera all that great with dynamic range over a yearly span. And I think it was like maybe a 1 to 2 year, maybe 2.5, 3 year span between the SL1 and the SL2, but it was still the same 18 megapixel sensor, and you don't have that much photo room to work with. You really want to upgrade to something like 20 megapixels. At least change something. I'm not even talking about the whole megapixel aspect of it. I'm talking about if you're going to have the resolution size of the camera and you're going to sell us something, at least change it by at least 1 megapixels. From the T1i to the T2i, you had a T1i with a 15 megapixel sensor. When the T2i came out, they made you feel like you had an upgrade of 3 megapixels. It might have been just 3 megapixels. You might not have seen the difference, but they made you feel via specs that you get more out of the camera because we've been working on the sensor. As a matter of fact, megapixels do matter to a lot of people, because especially pro photographers, because the more megapixels you have, the more resolving power you have, even if you don't have the best lens. If your lens is not all that sharp, your megapixels can compensate for that to some extent. If I have a 50 megapixel camera, my lens is not all that great. My 50 megapixel camera can compensate for the fact that I don't have all that much sharpness out of the lens. Now, it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be better than what you would have had you had a 12 megapixel camera or an 18 megapixel camera with a sucky lens as well. So you're going to be able to get more out of your lenses if your camera can resolve more. So megapixels does matter, and 18 megapixels is just like a spit in the face, because they keep rehashing the same amount of resolution to these cameras, and they just keep selling it. You might be saying, well, Canon sells a lot of cameras, they should be good then, right? They're great because people are buying it. Well, McDonald's sells a lot of hamburgers, and you shouldn't necessarily be eating everything that's at McDonald's, but they sell a lot of stuff, and they're one of the most popular food chains. So think about it in that regard. Now we have number 2, and this is more relevant to today, and I know people are going to get mad at me about this, and it's a very popular camera, but I'm going to say number 2 is the Canon 6D Mark II. And you might be saying, well, Devin, why don't you just choose the 6D Mark I? Isn't that a sucky camera? Didn't you tell us that camera sucks? It's just like, yes, but the 6D Mark I is a special type of insult to me, because I love the 6D. The 6D Mark II is a special type of insult to me, because I love the 6D Mark I. The 6D Mark I has gorgeous image quality, and what made me so frustrated about the 6D Mark I is that the focus system is crap. For them to come out with a beginner full frame camera is just stupid to me. And you might be saying to yourself, well, Devin, they want to make sure that you're able to afford a full frame camera. Well, think about it in this regard. There's used full frame cameras from Canon on the market, like the 5D Mark II, the 5D Classic, the 5D Mark I. And these cameras are well under the retail price at this point. You can get it probably like a 5D Mark I for like $100, $200 now. You can probably get a 5D Mark II for $400 to $800 now on the market, probably even with a good lens. And you're saying to me that we need to come out with another camera that doesn't have that big of an image quality difference from the 5D Mark II and legitimize it as a beginner full frame camera. It just doesn't make sense to me, because that gives them, the manufacturer, the liberty to strip features from a camera that's supposed to be a professional camera. If you have a full frame 35 megapixel or 35 millimeter censored camera, if you have a 35 millimeter censored camera, that's supposed to be the professional standard. The flat line, the bang. If you're there. You should have decent specs here. Nothing should be stripped from you, and it should be at least doable. If you have a what was the 6D? An 11 autofocus point system with the cross type focus point being in the center, and you can barely focus with the camera at all because none of the external focus points are needed, and then you get a prime lens and you try to use it, not only will you be out of focus because those prime lenses are fast and they have wide apertures and you risk losing focus, but you don't even want to use this camera anymore because you risk losing the moment because it doesn't even shoot all that fast. And if you combine a slow shooting camera with a high megapixel, 20 megapixels at the time, full frame camera, and then you have an inferior autofocus system, it's like, why should I even have this camera when I have a 7D Mark I that has a 10 times better autofocus system with 17 all cross type autofocus point system? Like, really, it was just an insult to me to make the 6D Mark I, because even though it was a good camera on image quality, if you can't get that image off, what's the point of even having the camera in the first place if it makes you struggle to get an image? You know, yes, it does focus a little bit better than the 7D in low light situations, but there's not many focus points. So you're stuck focusing and recomposing and doing all this up and down motion and action when you want your shallow, you know, your 70 to 200 2.8s, and you got this full frame sensor that can blur the background out easy. If you miss focus, you just done. It's like trash pictures at that point. Whereas if you had a crop frame sensor and you were a little off focus, it wasn't that big of a deal. But those full frame cameras, if you miss focus, you're just sorry, Charlie. And for them to do that with the 6D Mark I was bad enough, but now the 6D Mark II has come out and all they added was a flip screen. the image quality is notably worse. I went to DP Review. They have sample images that you can go to DP Review and go to one of those drop down menus, go to the studio comparison tool, go compare the 6D Mark I to the 6D Mark II, and side by side in most situations at different ISOs, you will have more noise with the 6D Mark II, the upgrade. And this upgrade took a long time to come to us. For Canon to do that, it's just a spit in the face. And then, of course, it does not have 4K. This camera came out, less than 5 years ago, and it does not have 4K. And it's a full-frame camera. And people tout it as one of the best, vlogging cameras. It has a flip-out screen. It has all this stuff, the focus system of the 80D. And those focus points are crammed in the center, just like the 6D Mark I. They pretty much, if you look at the 6D Mark II, they pretty much took the 6D Mark I's focus system, the same zone, and they just slapped more focus points in the same zone as the 6D Mark I. And the most frustrating part about the 6D Mark I was that the focus wasn't all that great. And you have to focus and recompose with a full-frame camera that blurs the background. So if you miss focus, you're just done. So it was so infuriating to me that not only does it have worse image quality, and I think the 6D Mark I's full-frame sensor is one of the best image quality sensors that Canon has ever made. It rivals the 5D Mark IV, which is one of my favorite cameras. But you got to understand that 6D Mark II is just a spit in the face. Just because it has a flip-out screen, you might as well get an 80D. Get an 80D. I'm not actually shooting this with the 80D. I'm shooting this with the G7. But I used to shoot my vlogs with the 80D because it had a flip-out screen, dual pixel autofocus, and it was good enough for most people's needs. And it's cheaper than any 6D Mark II. You might as well just buy a used 80D and call it a day. This is essentially what it is, and get some wider aperture lenses to compensate for the lack of image quality on the crop frame sensor. And number one, because I can go all day with this list, but number one, I have a special hate for, and I know hate is a strong word, but when I work my butt off, overtime to be able to afford cameras, to propel my livelihood, to do what I love, and I'm an enthusiast. Of course, you can already tell I'm enthusiastic about this technology and what it can do for us, and I know the camera manufacturer can do better. I hate it when they bring out a camera like this. And forgive me if I get the name of this camera wrong, because it's fairly new, so it applies to a lot of people right now. Number one will be the Canon 4000D. I believe they also call this the T100. Oh my goodness, this camera. And it's just one thing that really makes me mad about this camera. Of course, it's an 18 megapixel sensor because Canon they couldn't help themselves. I'm pretty sure they have a whole bunch of 18 megapixel sensors they have just laying around. Hey, let's put this in a new camera. And let's call it the T456IDSZ. No, it's not only the 18 megapixel sensor, it has 1080p. Okay, yes, it has 1080p, but more than any DSLR I have ever seen in my life, this is one of the most unreliable DSLRs I have ever seen. And, well, I've never seen it, but I've ever done research on it. The reason why this camera is so unreliable, because more than any, if Canon has come out with 100 DSLRs in their past, or SLRs in general in their past, this is the first SLR or DSLR interchangeable lens camera that I have ever seen with a plastic lens mount. I'm gonna let that sit in your system for a second. How many cameras have you ever seen from any brand to have a plastic lens mount? You might as well make it a point and shoot camera. And the reason I say this is because one of the big claims to fame to DSLRs are their interchangeable lenses. The ability to take a lens off and use it and not have to worry about it being unreliable. Click, click, bang, bang, bang. You can use prime lenses. You can use 70 to 200s, 24 to 105s, your 24 to 70s, your holy grail, your wide angle lenses. And you don't have to worry about the weight of it crushing your lens mount because the lens mount was made of metal. Matter of fact, one of the biggest claims to fame for the DSLRs was the fact that you could take these jokers anywhere. Unlike a point and shoot camera or a cell phone or anything in the world that has a camera on it or has the ability to take pictures, you had that durability, that Japanese build quality, because let's be frank, Most of the cameras that you see in today, they're all Japanese. Most of them are all Japanese. You got your Canons, your Nikons, your Panasonics, all Japanese. So you would think that that mentality, that thought process, that heart, that soul that they put into their engineering would go right into their cameras. And even though the build quality is always been there, the specs have not. We could always rely on the build quality. But let's talk about this 4000D and let's put it in context. Since it's a DSLR, it has the ability from Canon to use the EF and EFS lenses. That means you have an amalgam of lenses, the best lenses on the planet, pretty much. As far as selection, as far as all around, Canon has it made in spade with lenses. You have all those lenses at your disposal to put on this camera, and you mean to tell me that they made that camera with a plastic lens mount? So what if I put a 400mm on this? What if I want to do wildlife? You might be saying, well, why would you be doing wildlife with a beginner camera like the 4000D? Well, it's not necessarily about the body so much. It's so much more about the ability to have good lenses, because at the end of the day, it's actually about the lenses. If your lenses can let in more light to those camera sensors, the camera sensors tend to look all the same. Even if you get like a 1.8 lens for a crop frame camera, you can rival some of the full frame sensors. So if you're looking at this 4000D, and the biggest advantage you have to upgrade that camera is probably the lens, and that lens mount is not metal. And you drop that camera because things happen. Things happen all the time. That's why the 7D is able to be caught on fire, and you can run it up mountains, because pros do it all the time and do all these things that put their cameras in dangerous situations. But if you're not able to rely on its durability to even hold a lens like the 70-200, what if you don't have a monopod? What if you're just hand holding? You are afraid that, because I'm gonna tell you, if you put even a third-party lens on a Canon and you drop it, the Canon's gonna be like, do you know the contacts are not being made? It's gonna give you like this X symbol screen. There's the slightest thing that's off about a lens can make that camera bounce back in error, and it won't even use the lens. It won't even communicate with it. But then the slightest thing about the camera, now you're saying that it's plastic, and it's already hard enough to work with third-party lenses to get a cheaper price, but I can't do this anymore. Number one is the 4000D. Thanks for watching, guys. This is Devin from CenturyFX Studios. Stay tuned for the next video. I will be making an opposite to this video because I can't deal with Canon. I already got it on my list here. It is the top 5 cameras to have from Canon in 2019. I'm about to get started with that right now.